Welcome back to the Postgame Show on the podcast. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis after Ohio State's 35-16 win over Rutgers. And Landis, right off the top, I would like to give people permission to skip this.
Fair. I think that's, treat yourself to a nice little Saturday.
Go for a walk.
Yeah. It's beautiful outside here in Columbus.
Beautiful. Do something else. It's okay. We're giving you that permission. If you want to talk about this game, because it does matter on a couple fronts, right? It does matter because there are things that happen today that you can view Rutgers as sort of like a very JV version of Michigan, which would inform us about how things might go on the last Saturday in November. But what we like to do on this show is to start with something that we liked about Ohio State's performance. So where would you like to begin that conversation, Bill, before we get into everything else that people are going to listen to?
I would begin that conversation with what I thought was the play of the game. TreVeyon Henderson, 65-yard completion on 3rd and 9, drive that ends up with a touchdown for Ohio State to take a 28-19 lead, I believe it was at that point, or 28-16, excuse me. Just a really nice play, I think, all around. And it's TreVeyon doing a lot by himself, but then when you watch the replay of it, I came to appreciate a few different things that happened on that play to make it so. But the lead of that is TreVeyon catching the ball short of the sticks, erasing an angle on a linebacker, and then turning what would have just been a perfectly fine, 13-yard gain into a 65-yard gain that gets Ohio State down into the red zone, and they finish off that drive with a touchdown. But on that play, it starts with Josh Simmons and Donovan Jackson on the left side of the offensive line doing a nice job of picking up a twist that, wasn't perfect. They didn't stone the guy, but Donovan Jackson got back enough to kind of knock the rusher coming up the middle off his path and giving Kyle McCord time to check the ball down to TreVeyon. TreVeyon does this thing to get into space, and then further down the field, I thought you had two pretty good blocks from Jordan Fleming and Xavier Johnson to turn that into a big back-breaking hit against Rutgers. So on a day when there weren't a whole lot of plays that looked that way for Ohio State in terms of everything sort of being synced up perfectly at just about every position within the offense, that play stood out to me. And certainly at that moment, you thought, like, is Rutgers going to win this thing? What's going to happen here? And Ohio State flips the field, scores a touchdown, and it's kind of over from that point.
Let me ask, right? So asking a lot of questions this week of Ryan Day and Ohio State players about big plays, because neither Rutgers nor Ohio State had allowed a play of 40 yards or more coming into this game. They were the only two defenses in the country that could say that. And asking Ryan Day, are big plays by accident? Are big plays planned? Was that by accident or was that planned? Because here's my question, and you sent some information about this out to our texters. That sort of looks like a check down in the moment, but there are a lot of deep routes on that play that have not even fully developed by the time Kyle McCord decides to go to TreVeyon Henderson in the middle of the field. That looked schemed, that we're going to run defenders off and then get it to TreVeyon and see what happens. Did you think that play was planned and executed as they drew it up?
Yeah, I don't think they're drawing it up for 65, but I do think they were drawing it up to get the ball to TreVeyon.
Like he's first read? You think he's first read there?
That's kind of how it felt to me. Or maybe he's hot. I don't know. There wasn't a blitz there. They ran a stunt up front, but they didn't bring extra guys. They dropped 7 in the zone coverage, and there's 4 pretty vertical routes there. Like, it's 3rd and 9, you have to run vertical routes, I suppose, but these guys are running 20 yards down the field almost, and it did feel like to me they were clearing that out a little bit for TreVeyon, who just kind of ran a simple curl out of the backfield right over the ball, and he looks like he's expecting to get the ball immediately. Yeah. Like as soon as he whips his head around, he's expecting the ball to be there, and the ball is there. So I thought that was designed for him. It'll be, I don't know if Ryan Dell could ask about it post game or not. Maybe it's something that comes up on Tuesday, but I thought that was an instance of assuming that Rutgers was going to do what it did there, which is drop basically everybody in the coverage, take away all your vertical options, and then kind of using that against them and getting a pretty speedy, explosive guy in space.
Kyle did also find TreVeyon a lot on actual, for sure, checkdowns today. TreVeyon wound up with, I believe, 5 catches on 5 targets for 80 yards. Now 65 are on that one play. And I think we can get into more of like how Kyle McCord's seeing it and stuff. But I do think that there's an important distinction there. All the credit to TreVeyon for, as you said, blowing up that angle. And again, whenever people ask us or wonder to themselves, hey, why does Julian Fleming get the run that he gets? I mean, he usually makes 2 or 3 blocks a game that remind you of why he's out there.
Mhm.
And this was another circumstance of that. So one of the things Ryan Day was talking about was big plays come from execution, right? It's almost like accidental through execution. And that feels like a perfect example of that to me. That no, you're not drawing that up for 65, but you're thinking to yourself, if we run these guys off, Kyle makes a read, TreVeyon can beat his one guy, and then we get a couple blocks down the field, we've got a chance to pop this.
Mhm.
I think like that, it's like, okay, it doesn't have to be a ball that's in the air for 50 yards to get a 65-yard play. And just the way things were you know, evolving for Kyle McCord on the offense today, like it was pretty clear they weren't going to get a 65-yard pass play that way. So to get it this way was just like a perfect combination of what was working, they went to, and I don't know. They probably win without that play, but it went from being dicey to, I think, everybody watching the game as an Ohio State fan be able to take a breath.
Yeah, I mean, you were staring at a situation there where the defense was absolutely going to have to win you the game, and perhaps you didn't feel great about that. Depending on what your view was of how things went at certain junctures with Rutgers offense against Ohio State's defense, but that sort of flipped things there and kind of put it back into the offense's hands and created a cushion that Rutgers just really isn't built to come back from.
So I want to talk about what I liked, but let me say something real quick, which is, it's not an excuse, but it's a reminder. Notre Dame had an opportunity today at Clemson, didn't get it done. Notre Dame loses to Clemson. Wisconsin and Nebraska are two teams that are fighting. Anything. I don't know if fighting is the verb to use in the Big Ten West. Trying to meander their way to a Big Ten West title. They both lose to teams that came into today without Big Ten wins. So Wisconsin loses to Indiana and Nebraska loses to Michigan State. Ole Miss just escaped. Ole Miss, who's like a top 15 team, right? Just escaped because Texas A&M missed a field goal in the last play of the game. And Texas just beat Kansas State in overtime because Kansas State ran a ridiculous 4th down play where the quarterback fell down in overtime trying to win. So there are days that you have a bad day as a team, as a highly ranked, highly talented team, and you lose or you almost lose. And this wasn't that. They didn't look great in a lot of areas, but in the end, they even covered. Right? Like if you got the bet the right way, they even covered because of the thing that I like the most, and everybody watching this liked the most for Ohio State, which is red zone defense. And the fact that Rutgers, the stats said they had 6 red zone trips. I think I only wrote down 5. But anyway, Rutgers was 4 of 6 in the red zone, but they didn't score touchdowns in the red zone, which is like the whole thing. So the idea that in the first half, Rutgers has a 1st and 10 at the 12-yard line. They end up kicking a field goal on 4th and 2 at the 4. They have a 1st and goal at the 4-yard line. They wind up kicking a field goal on 4th and goal at the 3. They have a 1st and goal at the 2-yard line. They wind up kicking a field goal on 3rd and goal from the 2 because it's right at the end of the half. They wound up throwing their interception was when they were trying to do something other than just pound the run game. That was actually at the 20-yard line. That's in scoring territory. That turns into nothing. And then late in the game, they have a 1st and goal at the 9, and they wind up on a 4th and goal at the 6, getting stopped on downs on the sack by Ty Hamilton because they had to go for it at that point. We can talk about the decision-making of Rutgers there, Landis, but once again, just like against Wisconsin, that was so critical, the Ohio State defense stands up and turns potential 7s into 3s. For an offense, when you have Kyle McCord running the ball and Gavin Wimsatt as a run threat, that's a team that at least has some options in the red zone.
Yep.
And the fact that Ohio State didn't allow that, I mean, Ohio State was lucky to have held Rutgers to 9 and only be trailing 9-7 at the half. When it easily could have been 17-7, right? That's not a stretch.
No, not at all. And to your point, like Rutgers came into this game number 21 in the country in red zone touchdown percentage. I think because they have the run threat of Gavin Wimsatt when they're down in that area of the field, and Kyle McCord is a really good running back, and their offensive line is like serviceable. So like they do a good job of finishing drives. They scored 21 touchdowns on 29 red zone trips coming into this game. You can look up and down their schedule and say, like, well, they haven't played a ton of tremendous defenses. That's fair, but it had been a strength of theirs regardless. And Ohio State, similar to I think how it's done all year, Teams move the ball on them at times, and it's super frustrating. I get probably the most frustrating it's been in this game with some of the ways that it happened. But they do a really good job of walling up in the red zone, and they did it again, and a few different guys stepped up in those moments to do so. And I thought the last one, the stunt that they ran with Tyleek Williams and was it Jack Sawyer, and then Ty Hamilton ends up getting the sack. On that play, it looked like the route that they wanted to go to, Rutgers. That route was capped by true freshman cornerback Jermaine Matthews and true freshman safety Malik Hartford, who had the play in the game because Josh Proctor got hurt. So, you probably give more of the credit to the defensive line on that play, but two young guys there took the first read away from Gavin Wimsatt too.
We're dealing once again, and we'll get into Kyle McCord. We're not going to do it right off the bat. We're not going to be able to go to Ryan Day live in the post game. So I want to say one more thing, and then we do have information about what Ryan Day said post game that we have to get to. But, they're still not all the way healthy. So obviously Cade Stover doesn't play in this game. Like, he wasn't on the injury report, right? So, I don't know why. No. Why is he not questionable? If no, he's not going to play. So they're not great on the injury report. But in the end, he doesn't play. Denzel Burke is out after playing last week, which we didn't necessarily expect. We did know that Lathan Ransom was going to be out, and then Josh Proctor gets hurt in the middle of the game. So you wind up in a situation where you're not yourself on the back end when their secondary play has been one of the highlights of this team. Cade Stover is an important part of that offense. I didn't think Emeka Egbuka looked all the way back today, right? Do you agree with that?
He looked a little rusty. Yeah, slow, not explosive, maybe.
I thought the jet sweep, right? It looked like regular, healthy Emeka does more with that.
And also the play earlier in the game where he caught the ball near the sticks and just kind of went out of bounds. That was weird.
Yeah. It almost felt like it looked like maybe he was getting ready to dive for a first down. And then when he planted his foot to do something, he could feel it in his ankle, which I don't know what to tell a guy. It's like you go to make a move and you have a shooting pain in your leg, right? So they're not themselves. And they won by 19. How should we be factoring that in here? Because again, and we've been talking about this a lot all year, there's some true freshmen. Their true freshman depth is pretty good. That's mostly been talking about Jermaine Matthews at corner and Carnell Tate at receiver, but now you throw Malik Hartford at safety into that. What do we make of that in a game like this?
I guess I would say that I didn't, of all the guys who sort of had to step up, I didn't really find a single one of them all that impressive. Maybe Jermaine Matthews would be the one that would say so. I thought Malik Hartford missed a few tackles. I didn't think G. Scott blocked very well, or he blocked inconsistently, which I guess doesn't make him all that different from what Cade Stover has done as a blocker, but he also had that critical drop over the middle of the field. So I was left wanting a little more from a game where he was put more into a spotlight. So they overcame it. I don't know that I would come away from this thinking, oh, their depth is a strength, and this is a testament to how deep the Buckeyes are. I think they more or less got by. Than they did show me anything that was overly impressive.
All right, let's talk about the punt. Ryan Day postgame says that it's not a called punt. So, not a called play, called it a miscommunication that can't happen. Do they have a special teams coach?
Yep.
Are those players coached by an adult human? Or is it an algorithm?
It's a real guy. It's a real person.
Parker Fleming cannot be back next year. Next year. I get that it probably throws you off a little bit, like to fire the special teams coach in the middle of the year. I don't know exactly what you do. He can't be back. He can't be back. He can't be back. He can't be back. Right?
They do. Yeah, no, they do have what makes this special teams performance all the more damning is that, if I believe I have this right, they brought in 2 quality control assistants in the offseason to focus specifically on special teams, and it's worse. So I think you could do something if you wanted to. I don't even have those guys' names at the top of my head. I apologize, but I think you're probably right. You can't do anything now, with 3 games left in the regular season. But it's a joke, and he makes $500,000, and his unit has not done anything impressive. And in fact, they've looked like a liability in most games.
What did he see? Right. So if there's an overload, if there's he didn't come close.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder, and I guess I say it because he's from Australia. Right. And so I am not here to be anti-Australian. That's the last thing I want to be. But he did this against Rutgers. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
Last year.
Last year when he did it, it led to point. I'm pointing at you because he did it and made it in a blowout. And it was like, what are you doing faking a punt and a blowout? I was like, well, it's just a read. Now he does it in a game where it matters and doesn't come close to making it. We thought the finger pointing was bad. I would much rather have finger pointing than this. Sometimes when he does things like that, I say to myself, does he understand the rules of American football? And that is not, I'm not saying that no Australians understand the rules of American football, but has he been told by the adult human who's paid to sit in a room with him how this all works? When that play happens, don't you think to yourself briefly, does he know the rules?
Well, it's a heck of a play in Aussie rules football, right?
I know.
Yeah, which is what he did before he came over here. Yeah.
He forgot the sport he was playing?
Yeah.
So, but it's coaching, right? I mean, we're not, also it's a terrible play by the individual player, but like that opportunity is allowed to exist is absolutely mind-blowing. And Rutgers had a terrible special teams play that really hurt him too.
Yep. Should have been blocked by Ohio State.
Should have been blocked. But even then I felt like the Ohio State guys were worried about running into the punter.
Yeah, Arvell Reese like pulled up. Yeah.
So they pulled up. So even that I'm not blaming Arvell Reese there. He's a true freshman playing special teams. But again, he's not 1,000% locked in of like, okay, when can I go? When can I not? When I have, which I would go back to coaching again.
I agree.
So like they're going to lose a game. Oh, wait, it already happened. Sorry. I was going to say they're going to lose a game that really matters because of special teams, but they've already lost two. So he can't be back. Like this is a test for Ryan Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and if he's just back, it's the only thing I'm going to ask about in spring football. So we can get to that later.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I get called on spring football, my question will be, why is Parker Fleming still on this staff? You're the head coach. You're in charge of this. You're not giving your other 120 players the best chance to win when you have this unit coached by this person. And that unit has had repeated failures. Is there no accountability? It's everybody else is accountable at Ohio State. How is the special team coach not accountable? So like it has to end. And maybe it ends Monday.
It'd be interesting.
But it has to end at the end of this season at the very latest.
I think when that play happened, the first thing I thought, like, is he going to fire Parker Fleming? Like, are they going to not have a special teams coordinator on Monday? Okay. I think that's unlikely to happen, but I think there's also a non-zero chance that happens, right? And I don't know. I don't want to undersell the importance of having organized special teams and just like doing it on a whim and throwing somebody else there. No, I know they don't, but I don't mean to pretend like, oh, it's special teams. So anybody can do it and just throw them out there in the 10th game of the season and see what happens. But before it was a conversation about the staff balance being out of whack, and that point still remains. And now they're also deficient there, which was true, beforehand, but it's glaringly so now.
So there's another thing that you said during the game today, which was it felt like to you that the Ohio State linebackers missed a fair amount of tackles. Do you still think that?
Yeah, I thought the linebackers and, like I said, Malik Hartford, like once he got in there, missed some tackles too. I thought Josh Proctor and Sonny Styles played pretty well. Did not think Steel Chambers had a good game. Did not think Cody Simon had a good game. Tommy was a little better, but also I thought missed some tackles. And then he got hurt at the end of the game and had to leave and went back up the tunnel to the locker room. So we need to monitor that now as well. But the linebacker play, like 5 or so games into the season, was not very good, but then it felt like they had turned a corner a little bit and had strung a couple of good games together. I thought this was a step back. I thought this I'll have to go back and rewatch it, but my first impression of the reason why Rutgers was able to find so much success running the football is that the linebackers were not playing very well.
I know that Kamonangai was second in the Big Ten in rushing yards coming into this game. I think he was averaging 93 a game, 24 for 159. So we had the big 45-yarder on the very ingenuitous trick play. But even beyond that, he's over 100 yards, like legitimately, with a pretty decent yards per carry average. If you fired Parker Fleming, you could make James Laurinaitis the linebackers coach starting tomorrow and let him coach that unit and let Jim Knowles scheme up stuff and spread out the special team stuff. So like, given the way this game played out, a coaching move there would actually potentially help two things.
Yes. I think we are to believe that that's sort of already happening at linebacker anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm in favor of like making it official. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this defensive effort, though, it's a safety-driven defense, right? And to
Hmm.
come in without Lathan Ransom, and to lose Josh Proctor in the middle of the game, there were moments they were bringing the safeties on some blitzes sometimes and being disruptive with those
Yep.
guys. There was a play down the field, right, where Sonny Styles got caught in a coverage and had a pass interference call. And again, it reminded me of going back, talking to Sonny about this a couple weeks ago. And he was basically saying like he does feel more natural doing linebacker things. And then Jim Knowles this past week was talking about like, oh yeah, no, I think we could play him at deep safety, whatever. And I was like, I don't know about that. If that's the best use of that, it's a tough spot. I mean, to lose Lathan and to lose Josh in the midst of the game, and then have Sonny in a situation where maybe he's asked to do the things as still a fairly young player that he's not the best at. It didn't ruin the day for them, right?
Hmm.
Which I thought in and of itself is a bit of an accomplishment. And then they still had some of those safeties making plays.
Yeah, it didn't. It was fine. I think I'm at the point where I don't love Sonny in coverage.
I
Down
don't
at
think
least.
Sonny loves Sonny in coverage.
Yeah, which is like part of me is taking my cue from him, but there's just been he's made a play or two, right? I don't want to act like he's not done anything, but he's
Right.
had given up a couple. He gave up a few against Maryland, some tough matchups there. He got the pass interference call today. I think maybe he's had another pass interference call early in the year, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was a holding call. I just don't think it's his strength. Like he can do it, but I don't know that I want to rely on him to do that. Now at the moment, they probably don't have a choice because I don't think Malik Hartford is ready. And they don't really have anybody else there. We saw Kai Stokes get into the game today, like in
Yeah.
their dime package ahead of Cameron Martinez. Like maybe Kai Stokes can do it, but you're sacrificing a lot of size and speed there. I'm not saying play Kai over Sonny, but I maybe like Sonny down closer to the line of scrimmage. The more as this season has gone on, I think that's more natural for him, which is like, can he play Will linebacker? I don't know. If Cody Simon and Seal Chambers are inconsistent, can Sonny play in that spot next to Tommy? Maybe that's worth looking at. As things are right now, maybe you can't because you're too short-handed on the back end of the defense. But like there was an opportunity for that position to be a liability in this game, given how short-handed they were, and perhaps a better offense would have taken advantage of that. Gavin Wimsatt was not a particularly accurate thrower in this game. But it was fine. Like they got by without it, and like Sonny's still a playmaker. He needs to be out there, just maybe not in the spot that he's in.
But yet the secondary makes a huge play in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So they try to throw the little pop pass off a run action with the quarterback. It's a good wrinkle by them. I understand why Rutgers tried it. They had been down in the red zone. They had not gotten into the end zone. They're going to try something else here. It winds up turning into a pick six. It's just a devastating. I mean, it's an 85-yard pick six. It's a devastating play. It reminds me of the game a couple weeks ago when Washington didn't score an offensive touchdown and wound up winning a game on a pick six because the defense stands up and in the red zone makes a play and runs it back the other direction. But that's like a play, right? Proctor sort of makes a read on that play. Jordan Hancock's in the right place at the right time. You get a little bit of a break on the bounce, but as much as they're kind of stapling it together in the secondary today, but yet in that moment, rather than getting fooled, it's certainly not a trick play, but rather than biting on something, guys are in the right spot. Josh Proctor gets hurt on the play, but it turns into a pick six. I think that still is like indicative of, even when the secondary is not at its best, it still has playmaking capabilities that showed up right when they needed them.
Yeah, it did, and it balanced out. Like I actually didn't think Jordan Hancock had a great game in coverage, or maybe he was just put in some tough spots with some of the blitzing they were doing.
Yeah.
But he gave up a few things. But when a guy balances it out with a 93-yard pick six, it's hard to get too upset about that.
Yeah. So, what did you think? So one of the other things that I think is not, I think it's worth Ohio State fans having this in their mind. Ohio State does not play Rutgers next year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the saving graces of this new version of the Big Ten is that Ohio State is getting out of a world. As much as Ohio State and Ohio State fans will miss playing Penn State every year, nobody's going to miss Ohio State playing Indiana, Rutgers, and Maryland every year. So that's going to be fun for Ohio State to not play them every year. Gavin Wimsatt right now is not ready. He's not all the way ready to win a game like this. He played 4 games in his first year. This is his 3rd year. So I think, right, they preserved the red shirt that year. Mm-hmm. So he would be a fourth-year junior in 2024 when Ohio State doesn't play him. And then I'm assuming he'll be back as a fifth-year senior in 2025 when Rutgers does come to Ohio Stadium. If Gavin Wimsatt was like 2 more years down the road of being ready to try to win a game like this could have been a much rougher day for Ohio State, because instead Rutgers is competing in the first half like with not throwing passes. They're not competing passes at all. And then he starts completing a couple in the second half. He's a really interesting player. He's just still developing. Rutgers with him, if they keep playing defense like this and he gets to year 5, they could be a problem that year, like a little bit. It's the way a program like that should build. But I did think Ohio State was saved a little bit today by the fact that he throwing the ball, he's not ready for a defense like Ohio State. Running the ball, he's a threat.
Yeah, and that's why Rutgers has found, some success as an offense this year. They're much better this year than they were last year. They're arguably the most improved offensive team in the country, even though they're still not very good on offense. He missed like a couple, one egregious miss, like Jordan Hancock got beat on a double move, and Gavin Wimsatt just overthrew. There's a little bit of pressure there, but like a better quarterback, I think, completes that pass, and it's probably a touchdown. So yeah, it's interesting. Like if you're, I don't know, monitoring things as they're building in the Big Ten, I thought Rutgers showed a little something.
All right, let's talk about Kyle McCord. What did you think of Kyle McCord today?
The middle of the game was horrendous. He was 11 for 11, 1 of 5, then 7 for his last 10, and that 1 of 5 was about as bad as I've seen 5 throws from a quarterback look. I think there was the drop from Julian Fleming in there that I thought was an inaccurate pass. It hit him in the hands. Probably should have caught it. Fleming has had some issues with drops. Marvin Harrison Jr. probably catches that pass, but I didn't think it was a tremendous throw. It was a little off target. He had the ball to Marvin Harrison down the sideline where Marvin was open and had to step on the defender, and he underthrew him and invited the coverage back into the play. And maybe there was a little bit of contact there, but it was a bad throw. And then the interception I thought was terrible. Stared Marvin Harrison down on the out route and then threw the ball way too flat with a defender underneath and allowed him to pick that pass off. And, if he wanted to see him bounce back and be a little more accurate and make some better decisions, I don't think you saw that in this game. So I don't know. I'm kind of where I've been, which is like he needs to be better, and he's really not getting better.
So that the pick on that throw to Marvin didn't seem like a bad decision, right?
No, it was,
Marvin, it was there, but it was just a bad throw, and it's one of those. I mean, that's the over the linebacker in front of the safety. Like that's like they do that 1,000 times a practice, right? Like that is a pretty generic throw that a quarterback at this level has to make. And, sometimes you get picked because you don't see the linebacker underneath. That definitely was not it. That was like and then you start wondering, I don't know, like the ankle's a thing, but that was just like a failure of like physical play, not of bad read, not of like the first pick against Wisconsin last week where it was like, what are you doing? It's like, you knew what he was doing and he just executed it very poorly. Right.
Mm-hmm. It was a bad throw. Yeah. It wasn't a bad decision. It was a bad throw. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is bad, but I think is less bad than an ridiculously poor decision.
Yes, but right? I guess I would also say that he helped make it a bad throw by just like telling that linebacker where he was going with the ball from the second the ball was snapped, right? So it was not the proper kind of throw for that scenario, and then you exacerbated it by staring him down and like basically telling the linebacker where the ball was going to go in the first place. So he also had one, I think it might have been on the drive where Fleming had the drop where he like threw a quick check down the TreVeyon and Marvin was like wide open.
So I thought that's what I'm curious about, because certainly one of our texters had put this theory forth. We talked about it on the pick show. I didn't think it was a terrible theory that, CJ sort of bottomed out in 2021 against Tulsa and then had the week off and then bounced back. Austin had compared it to CJ's Nebraska game, right, which was later in the year against a Big Ten opponent, and then you bounce back. So the idea of a Kyle McCord bounce back, I thought the most important thing he had to do was, from a decision-making standpoint, learn from the Wisconsin pick and not do something like that again. I thought he was tentative then today, though. Like, you want him to take check downs. they showed that, again, you and I are at home, Berman and Austin are at the stadium. We can't see every route that's developing sometimes, but CBS went out of its way to show that one play where Marvin was pretty wide open and Kyle took the check down right away. And he seemed too eager. I think Ryan Day really wants his quarterbacks to take checkdowns, right? Like this was sort of like a push and pull with CJ, because I think CJ always thought, I can diagnose this and figure it out. I don't want to take the easy thing. That's how CJ operates. That's why he was the second pick in the draft. He's having a good rookie year. I thought he was too willing to take the check down today, and that plants the seed to me of, if his response to a bad decision against Wisconsin, if he's gun shy at all now and doesn't want to make throws into coverage, that is not the response you want after a situation like that. I thought when they needed it more in the second half, he made some throws in the middle of the field, but did you feel that at all, or am I exaggerating things?
No, it felt that way to me too. I want to look now and see like depth of target stuff. The stat broadcast says that he had 15 passes that were mid-range, but mid-range is 5 to 14 yards. So yeah. I think a lot of that was 5 yards. I'm curious to see his depth of target in this game, because I don't write down like route combinations and stuff as the game's happening live. I try to do that when I rewatch the game, but I do mark down like check down the G, check down the tray, and there's a lot of that in here as I'm like looking through my play sheet here as I tally the offensive plays. So I agree that it did feel tentative. And then the one time, I think it was the one time that he like kind of took a shot to Marvin, it was a total misfire. So yeah, it wasn't a tremendous response. I don't think, like, he started 11 for 11, right? But I don't know how many of those 11 were thrown more than 10 yards down the field. One?
Yeah, like even the 11 for 11 didn't really necessarily feel like what you want like an Ohio State quarterback to be doing.
Yeah. The G-Scott touchdown was nice. It was a nice ball on the tight end wheel route.
It was a nice ball. Like sometimes you make a throw like that where you force the person to catch it. Didn't it feel? It's like, I'm going to stick it on your number, on your shoulder. You can almost catch it with your neck. Like you don't have a choice but to catch it. I thought there's like it was a nice play by G. Scott, but he stuck it to him. Like it was
the ball kind of caught G. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when G had a chance to make a play in the middle of the field, maybe the ball was a little bit out in front of him, but he short-armed it a little bit.
Yeah,
He missed Cade. How much do you think this offense and Kyle McCord missed Cade Stover today?
Yeah, I think you, and if the game is, check down Charlie for the whole game, I think that's where Cade Stover flourishes, catching a 5-yard pass, making a tackler miss, and then turn it into a 12-yard pass. So they probably did miss him a little bit. I don't know if he would have helped the blocking effort any more than G. Scott did, but I don't think Cade would have dropped that ball over the middle of the field, and I think he would have found some more real estate like underneath against Rutgers defense.
19 of the 26 targets, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 of the 26 targets were to receivers for 11 catches for 85 yards, so that's the part. Rutgers defense is good. Rutgers defense is not impenetrable, right? So the place where Rutgers is vulnerable is against a steady run game. And so we had talked about this when we were previewing the game, that Michigan only scored 31 on Rutgers, but Michigan punted on its first possession and then scored or had a scoring opportunity. They missed a field goal on every other possession of the game. And their final possession was like a 10-play drive where they wound up kneeling at the end.
Yeah.
So Michigan was like in total control of that game after the first drive. They did what they wanted to do. They did what Michigan does. And I know you have to take what the defense gives you, but I find it frustrating in games like this where Ohio State, yes, Cade Stover's out, but they have Emeka Egbuka. Yes, he's limited, but they have Marvin Harrison Jr., they have TreVeyon Henderson. They still have, G. Scott and Julian Fleming and Carnell Tate are still like the top. If they were the top 3 skill guys on almost any other team in the Big Ten, if they'd be Penn State's top 3 skill guys, right? I mean, and it didn't feel like Ohio State was dictating to Rutgers.
Yep.
And that, especially in the first half. And again, it was another bad first half. They didn't convert a third down in the first half. They were 0 for 5. They were running the ball, but it didn't they were running the ball okay on first down, but it didn't feel like it was getting them anywhere. It's like, oh, that was a nice run of 5 yards, and then nothing. And then nothing happened. Like, why do games like that happen, do you think? Why don't they dictate more? Like, they went out against Georgia, and you can't compare every game in the world to the Georgia game. I understand that. But a year ago, they go out against Georgia, and they dictate, like, we're going to attack you like this. Why are there days like this where they're taking what Rutgers is allowing them to take for a whole half when they're Ohio State?
Well, I don't think it's as easy as saying we're going to dictate terms, right? If a defense is going to play two safeties over the top, like Rutgers was doing, it is hard to get those explosive plays. But you can be more efficient. Like, I thought that first touchdown drive, they were running it well. They got in the two play action passes, one to Emeka Ibuka for 10 yards, one to G. Scott on the touchdown, set up off of them. I thought running the ball pretty well earlier on that drive. And then I don't know if they ran another hard play action pass the rest of the game. Not until I don't have play action pass written down on my sheet until the fourth quarter. Now, granted, they only ran 8 plays in the third quarter. But like, I thought they got away from that. Like, I thought that was working. I thought that might be the method to take it to Rutgers defense a little bit, is like run it, because they're not a particularly good run defense, get them sucked up a little bit, and then start throwing play action passes over their heads. And like, they never really tried to do it all that much. And I don't know, the one drive got thrown off kilter by the sack to put them in 2nd and 19. And then I think the drive after that was when Kyle underthrew Marvin on 3rd down. And then a drive after that was the interception. And then they kind of just went back to short passing and running the ball for the rest of the game. So I don't know how it happens. It does seem like Ohio State finds concepts that work and then just lets them work for one drive and then kind of quickly abandons them sometimes.
Now, in the second half, they did score touchdowns on 3 of their 4 offensive drives. So that's, quite good. Plus, they had a defensive touchdown. But the first half, punt, touchdown, punt, the punt that is the fake punt that doesn't work, interception. So, like, one score on 6 first half drives this is not the first time they've had a bad first half, and they are going to run into a situation where that's going to take them out of the game before they have a chance to get in it.
Yeah, I agree. That's my biggest worry with them is just wasted opportunities to score points, or like empty drives. Like, the thing that makes Ohio State's defense so good is like the stop rate, like how often they just don't let you score. The inverse is like the offense's biggest problem. They just don't score enough. They don't have enough drives that end with points. Or at least in the first half of this game, they didn't. To be fair, they did score when they had the ball in the second half. But it's like, there's not, the thing that's frustrating is like there's not one reason for that, right? It's like I said, like even the drive with the fake punts, like that fake punt should have never happened. G. Scott should have caught that ball on 3rd and 5. You know what I mean? Like, they let like mistakes beget other mistakes, and it just gets out of their hands too quickly.
So what did you think of the offensive line? What did you think of the offensive line overall?
Fine. Like, I thought part of the issue, I guess, with not having Cade Stover is that they were an 11 personnel a lot, and they weren't max protecting. So when Rutgers blitzed, I thought like Ohio State didn't always have enough people to handle that. There were some times where Ohio State seemed to call a slide one way and the pressure came from the other way. So I don't know if that's like bad scouting or like Rutgers changing up some stuff. Rutgers was coming off a bye week, which I think is probably worth mentioning. So maybe there were some different things there that Ohio State wasn't exactly expecting. So like, I thought it was okay. Josh Fryer got mixed up on the play where they gave up the sack. I don't know if there were any other like egregious mistakes from the offensive line.
I think it was the play where Kyle wound up pump faking and throwing to Emeka, and Emeka didn't get the first down. Fryer blocked down, like the whole line blocked down, and the guy right over Fryer came in untouched, and they blitzed from that side, and that guy also came in untouched.
Yeah.
And so they wind up on a 3rd down with 2 guys in Kyle McCord's face who are unblocked. And if you watch that play, Josh Fryer blocks down, but Matt Jones and Carson Hinsman are in the middle of the line blocking no one. There's no one to block. And there are 2 free guys on the outside. And so what is that? Like, whatever that is, it's bad.
Yeah, there were I want to say there were 1 or 2 plays last week where I felt like 1 or 2 guys had a different call. Like there was like a 4-man slide, but like one of the 4 went the wrong way. Like there were some things that were out of sync at times with pass protection last week, and maybe some of that was carrying over to this week. I don't. Maybe it's fair to ask, like, do you spend so much time on getting the run game right that now your pass protection is starting to slip a little bit? Because I actually think their pass protection for most of the year has been pretty good, but the last 2 weeks is maybe the worst it's been. Last week was the worst it's been. This week didn't feel quite as consistently bad, but there were some hiccups, like as you're saying there. So I don't know what that stems from, but it did seem like it was either miscommunication up front or guessing wrong, I guess, on the call of where exactly the pressure was going to come from.
And then you can tell again, the offensive line getting to the second level in the run game. It might have been their first run call of the game. Donovan Jackson was supposed to get to the second level and like got out there, didn't block anybody, and the linebacker that he was supposed to block went in the hole and made the tackle. And Donovan Jackson like made a U-turn and was like following that guy back into the hole to watch him make the tackle. And it's like, well, that's not good. And then like the next couple of run plays, you could see guys getting to the second level and making blocks. And it's just like, when they're consistent at it, and again, they didn't run the ball well today. Who knows what would have happened? But it's the difference, like they don't do it consistently. But man, when they get it, they can do what they did at times today. And then a lot of the other times, it's like that's what's happening, right? They're not getting that block, and then the unblocked linebacker is making tackles on Trey.
Yeah, I mean that's why so in this game, this is from Game on Paper, which at times can be a little off. So maybe this isn't exactly right. They only had 4 stuffed runs that gain 0 or negative, which I think is not terrible on a day when you run the ball as much as they did. 11 runs for 2 yards or more, which there were a lot of 2. There were a lot of 2s in there, but they did have 16 that went for 4 or more. Yeah. 57% of their runs went for 4 or more. So there definitely were some ones that got blocked up pretty good. I thought they ran one back power a few times where they just had like the one puller with Donovan Jackson, or Matt Jones had a really good one where he like climbed up and just buried a linebacker. I think it might have been Mohamed Touré. Like Mohamed Touré like still kind of made the tackle falling to the ground because he's a really good player. Yeah. But I thought that was blocked up well. So that was a good play for them. And they used that play to build a play action pass earlier to, I think it was the Emeka Ibuka play. So there was some good stuff in there. The long run, I want to find it. Was it the touchdown? Must have been. TreVeyon have a long touchdown run in this game? Am I losing my mind?
We just watched the whole game for 3.5 hours. I can't remember what happened.
Yeah, let me see. I have it here.
TreVeyon, he had a 9-yard touchdown run.
TreVeyon had a 27-yard run in the fourth quarter, where Ohio State last week ran this play called wind back a bunch of times, which is like kind of like a zone running play, but like the slot receiver motions in tight and then kind of pulls across the formation. And like he ends up being the lead blocker. And they ran that probably 5 or 6 times last week. They ran it a couple times last year. And then in this game, they got into that look. The receiver came across the formation, but then TreVeyon actually ran the opposite way, which was like kind of a change up, and he got 27 yards on that play. So like I actually think they are figuring some things out in terms of like run game design, sequencing plays, figuring out what works best for their players. It's never going to look perfect. I think you're always going to have probably too many 2-yard runs or enough to drive you mad. But if they did after the Maryland game kind of like go back to the drawing board and try to figure some stuff out to make this run game more efficient, I think they have landed on some good ideas. It's just that the offensive line is too inconsistent to make those ideas hit all the time, but they're certainly hitting better, I think, than they were earlier in the season.
TreVeyon, 208 of Ohio State's 328 total yards, 63.4% of the offense for TreVeyon Henderson. Ohio State actually outgained by Rutgers in this game, which is what happens when you have a pick 6. But yards per play, Ohio State averaged 6. Rutgers averaged 5.3 because Rutgers did have 13 more plays than Ohio State, 68 to 55. So this is one of those things. And I thought we fell into it as a beat during the course of this week, where we sort of had a string of questions of like, could you target Marvin even more? Oh, do you need to target Cade more? Oh, do you need to throw it to the running backs more? Oh, do you throw it to the other receivers more? And it's like, it's one ball, man. It's one ball. So this distribution, it's a fine line, because you definitely want your quarterback to take a check down and not hold the ball. I thought you could see Kyle McCord thinking to himself, don't hold the ball.
Yes.
And that's good, right? Is that good or bad?
I think that's mostly good. Yeah.
I think it's mostly good too. But it also felt like there were a few times where the the first read had not even had a chance to really develop, and he was thinking that to himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have an offensive line that maybe you don't believe in fully, it plants that seed. When you have a defense that is maybe going to give you some different looks, and Greg Schiano is a good defensive coach, right? Like, we understand that idea, but I almost thought the pendulum swung too far. So the mistake by the quarterback for Ohio State today was a physical mistake, not a mental mistake. So you can work with that. Still a killer mistake. But now I think you have to, now that you want him to swing back towards, like, don't be afraid to let something develop, because in another half second, a Mecca would have been open 20 yards down the field, or Marvin was about to beat his guy, right? Like, you can't give up on that if you're the Ohio State offense.
No, I don't think you can. And I also think Kyle can be helped too by more play action pass. Like, I just don't think they do it enough. I thought it was weird they didn't really do any of it last week, and they didn't do enough of it today, I don't think. And it does feel like teams have a little bit of a beat on the play action shot plays that Ryan Day likes to call. They're just not really hitting at the same way they hit last year. And I think that's a combination of Kyle being hesitant, Kyle not seeing it, offensive line not providing enough time and predictability with those calls. So they maybe need to go back to that and figure out some new ways to get into some of those things. But I think that is a way, if you get Kyle outside of the pocket a little bit, maybe he doesn't feel that the body's around him as much and is willing to let things develop a half second longer. I just think it's hard. And like, he's not, as we said on the midweek show, like, he's actually not getting pressured at an outsized rate compared to his predecessors. He's getting pressured slightly more, but it does seem to be impacting him. So if he can get himself to spaces on the field where he doesn't maybe feel that clock burning in his head, that can unlock some more for this offense.
So how should Ohio State fans come away from this game? Should they be take the win, go home, stuff happened? Should they be reading this, looking ahead to Michigan, and be very worried? How would you read this?
I don't think I would be tremendously worried about what I saw from the defense, because they were missing 2 starters in the back end, and by the middle of the game, 3 starters in the secondary. Maybe you're a little concerned about the linebackers. I actually think you should feel pretty good about what they're doing running the ball. But you're certainly not encouraged by what Kyle McCord did in this game, because it wasn't a step forward. So probably not feeling great. I don't know that you should feel great. It's not merely a take the win thing for me now, because you want to see them building toward playing their best football when Michigan comes around. And I don't think they're doing that. And I don't know if you're seeing them make progress in the areas where you think they need to close a gap a little bit. So if you have mixed feelings, or even kind of feel bad after a win like this, I think I understand why.
We did a long show. We would direct people toward it on Wednesday on Kings of Columbus about Kyle McCord. I come away from this, I think, probably slightly more concerned about the quarterback situation, because I certainly was leaving open room for, like, okay, there were some things that happened last week, but this is a chance for a bounce back. And instead, it feel like I said before, it went too far. It does feel like we are in a cycle a little bit of slow starts, and that playing better in the second half is a good thing, but the first half clunkiness of the offense, it feels like it has happened enough now to make you wonder if there's something going on there, right?
Yeah, it is like because I'm sure maybe some people who really like Kyle might hear that and say, "Look, well, you started 11 for 11." Like 11 for 11 didn't feel like a fast start to me, like in a very weird way. Yeah,
because like it wasn't on the attack, like it wasn't. It was sort of, I don't want to say surrendering, because 11 for 11 is 11 for 11. Tate Martell would tell you that, but it didn't feel like Ohio State was in control. It felt like they were saying, okay, well, I guess we'll take this. I guess we'll take this. And then, I mean, in a world where, 11 for 11 is nice, but it's punt, touchdown, punt, failed, fake punt, interception. Like, that's That's not what the Ohio State offense should be. So if you're completing a bunch of checkdowns, but you're not converting on third down, the third down was really bad in the first half. And it's because they had so far to go on third down. Like the offense wasn't like connected. 3rd and 6, 3rd and 19, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 5. And they were all failures. The 3rd and 5 was the G. Scott drop over the middle where it felt like a lot of it worked and then the player didn't make the catch. But that's much more important than starting 11 for 11.
Yeah. And this, so here's the progression of the 11 for 11. 3 yards, 3 yards, 10 yards to Emeka, first down, 14 yards to G for a touchdown, 9 yards, which was a check down where G. Scott broke a tackle, 4 yards, 7 yards, 0 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards, 3 yards.
Yeah, that's not what you want.
No.
You can't live in that world if you're Ohio State. You've got to be Ohio State. And as much as everybody, I think, has come around now on the idea of this is a defense-first team, TreVeyon provided the explosion today. Marvin Harrison Jr. still had 2 touchdown catches. There's still DNA at the heart of Ohio State that if they're not going to be that offensively, they're not going to get it done.
Yeah.
Like when push comes to shove, they're not going to win. As good as their defense is, they're not going to win the national championship game 17-14.
Correct. They're not going to win the national championship game playing dink and dunk.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's what you're coming away from this a little bit. All right. Our guy, Mike Yarostowski, our producer, is here. We have questions from our tech subscribers. If you'd like to be a tech subscriber, you can sign up for a 2-week free trial at 614-662-4509. You get your phone out, you send a text, you get a link back, you sign up there. You have to put in your credit card. We're not lying to you, but you don't get charged right away. You only get charged after 2 weeks. And if you don't like it or you don't think it's worth the money, you can type stop and you're out. At any point, you can type stop and you're out. You could do it right this very second. I'm done. Stop, you're out. Super easy. I'm still trying to get out of, we wound up with I think 2 ESPN Plus accounts in our house, and I'm still trying to get out of one of them, and I can't figure out how to do it. I'm trapped. Help me. That's not your problem. Mike, questions from the texters. Where are we starting out?
Yeah, guys, we're going to start out with Nick. Nick would like to know, he says, hey, guys, is Rutgers the JV version of the team up north? Meaning mobile quarterback, run the ball well, and play defense. If Ohio State struggled at times with Rutgers today, it feels like we're going to be in some serious trouble in 3 weeks.
Even the trick play, right?
Mm-hmm.
The quarterback hands the ball between his legs, the double hike, hands the ball between his legs to the running back, is reminiscent of what Michigan ran last year, right? When they handed off and then threw the running back linebacker through the pop pass off the handoff, right? Like that even felt a little bit like Michigan to me. Does that feel apt to you, Landis?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm just curious about this. Rutgers is 40th in the country in rushing offense. Michigan's 43rd.
Oh. Would you rather have Blake Corum or Kyle McCord?
Right now, this year, I think Kyle McCord is playing better.
Yeah. I think there's a lot there. I actually think part of the reason, what Ohio State usually does, like Rutgers can't handle, right? When they throw the ball all over the place, like Rutgers can't handle that. So I do think Rutgers sometimes can hang a little bit with Michigan at times because they're more similar. Like they're used to that. And so,
and both teams don't mind playing possession.
Right. So I do think, again, I wrote in 2016, Rutgers will never beat Ohio State. This is almost like a version of that to me of this, it was there and it still was never really there.
Right.
Because even when it was there, the Rutgers quarterback can't really throw, and Ohio State still has Marvin Harrison Jr. They still have TreVeyon Henderson. So even that, it's not really there. But and we're in November. So I, at times in my career covering Ohio State, have been too obsessed in mid-September with, what does this mean for Michigan? What does this mean for the playoff? And sometimes you take a game for what it is. In November, when the teams are this similar, it's absolutely time to do that. So yes, I would say this should get Ohio State back to the drawing board on what are we going to do against Michigan, because it felt like they could not really stop the Rutgers run game today.
They couldn't, and also and none of it should have been surprising to them. Maybe Jim Knowles will say like they did this, and this differently because, as I said, like Rutgers did have an extra week to prepare for this game. And I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I've watched every single Rutgers game to know if this was par for the course or if they were doing different things. But whoever the play-by-play or the color analyst was like, he was on it. He was like calling out the stuff Rutgers was going to do. So I can't imagine much of it was very different from what they've done. So the fact that like you knew they were going to run it and then they still kind of ran it is not particularly encouraging. So if that's like where you're at as you think about the Michigan game, I think that's fair.
Do you think they need to do something at linebacker? And this would be more Cody Simon over Steel Chambers, even though it has been getting closer to a split. Where do you think that should be? Especially against Michigan, especially against a team that's going to run it.
Yeah, probably less of a split. The thing that concerns me is like Cody Simon can't be on the field when a team's throwing the ball. Rutgers completed a pass today because Cody Simon fell down, like dropping back in the zone coverage. And Notre Dame found some stuff throwing the ball against Cody Simon in zone coverage too. So my answer to linebacker would be play Sonny there. I don't think they're going to get that drastic.
Yeah.
So Cody, I think, has been much better over the course of the season against the run than Steel Chambers has been. So maybe if that's 50-50, maybe it needs to be more like 70-30 in favor of Cody. Except
when you get into that kind of thing, then Michigan's just going to throw it when Cody Simon's on the field and run it when Steel Chambers is on the field.
Yeah, right. Like Michigan's going to throw it to Colston Loveland over Cody Simon said the way Notre Dame did to Mitchell Evans.
Yeah. Mike, what else?
Yeah, guys, next question comes from Andrew. He says he's kind of wondering more of an observation that he'd like to get your guys' thoughts on. He thought in the first half today, Ryan Day needed to let Kyle rip the ball down the field more. He thought there were a lot of quick throws and need to trust our receivers down the field against their cornerbacks. Maybe thinking that kind of led to some conservative play from Kyle.
I don't know how much anybody trusts the offensive line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's both in the play calling and in Kyle executing it. And again, I don't know how many of those they were trying to set up that he wound up taking a check down on, right? But I agree. It feels like the last 2 years, they've just been sort of like, well, people are taking away the deep shot. And it's like, okay, but I don't know. Does nobody throw the ball down the field if they drop two safeties deep? I guess that's it. You can't throw a ball more than 15 yards down the field. I don't know, Landis.
I mean, it neuters it for sure. That's why everyone in the NFL is playing two high safeties now, and I think you're probably seeing college football perhaps trend back in that direction. Maybe you'll see the rise of the rushing attack again here as teams try to build that way. I think that's something interesting to monitor. I don't know that Ryan Day is holding Kyle McCord back from throwing the ball down the field. I think Kyle McCord is holding Kyle McCord back from throwing the ball down the field.
I think on the list of what's holding Kyle McCord back from throwing the ball down the field, I think I would put the offensive line and sort of like Kyle himself maybe ahead of the play calling. Mm-hmm. Right? They have shots planned into this, and it feels like they just very seldom wind up in a place where they're actually able to let it rip when they call it.
Yes, I think that's right. And I don't know, it's hard when we're watching television because we don't get to see the full view, right? How often are those guys open down the field and Kyle's checking it down anyway? I don't know if that's happening a lot. I'm inclined to believe that it's not happening a ton because I think Ryan Day would say something about it, and I also think the announcers have a different view than we do would say something about it too, which is why when they pointed out on that one play that Marvin was open when Kyle took a check down, that's why that stuck out so much to me. So yeah, I'd put it more on the line and just time and Kyle's sense of time to throw the ball. But you can be explosive in the passing game without throwing the ball 30 yards down the field every time. And I guess I would agree that maybe they don't do enough of some of those plays that you can get 35 yards on a slant. Like Rutgers had an explosive passing play on a slant because a corner was playing with outside leverage and a safety missed a tackle. That happens all the time. But Ohio State doesn't seem to put its receivers in those positions all that often.
Rutgers paired, right? They had that 35-yard slant where, right, they got inside leverage on Hancock. He missed the tackle. Then I think Hartford came over and missed the tackle. Mm-hmm. And then they threw a 19-yard touchdown on the next play. And at that point in the game, I was like, well, that's Rutgers is officially more explosive in the passing game than Ohio State is. And it is just like, why is that not happening with Ohio State? Like those kind of plays, bang, 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 right? And Ohio State did have that one drive early where they had a little bit of that, right? And it felt like the run and the pass were connected. They had a couple play action, but that they don't do that more consistently. Middle of the field, hit a guy on the move. That I think is more concerning than they don't take the deep shots like they used to when they had Chris Olave.
Yeah, this is the game. I don't have access to all 22 film. I wish I did. Maybe there's a person or two I can talk to try to get it. This is the game where I most want to see it. Like what was going on those plays when Kyle was checking the ball down, I think will be very instructive.
I agree. Mike, what else?
Yeah, guys, next question comes from the 513. They asked, Rutgers had more total yards in first downs than we did today. What am I supposed to take from that?
Rutgers had 13 more plays.
Pick six is part of that. Pick six is part of that. Ohio State did average more yards per play. But I do think there's something about the efficiency of the Ohio State offense that you still can take from that. And we've talked about, like, even when they're good, like the explosion, right, is there, but the clockwork, they had one drive of it, but like the thing where it feels like Ohio State is leaning on you and they get to tempo. Because once they feel that, they usually get the tempo. Did they get the tempo at all today?
Didn't really feel like it. No,
it never felt like Florida State's losing to Pitt, by the way. Again, it's one of these things. Missouri's about to go ahead of Georgia, I think. Like, stuff happens.
Luther Burden got hurt.
Who got hurt?
Luther Burden was just down before they went to commercial.
So like that's the thing. More plays for Rutgers, pick six for Ohio State, but also if you go back in the history of Ohio State Rutgers, like Ohio State beats Rutgers by 40. Like this is Rutgers throws in a goofy special teams thing and boy, they fight and they compete or whatever, but it's not this. It's not this.
Yeah. Rutgers also, I mean, and this is not to excuse Ohio State's inefficiencies, but Rutgers got 45 yards on a trick play, basically.
They did.
Yeah.
But listen, also, we talked about it, like Isaiah Pacheco is a starting NFL running back, and he never really hurt Ohio State in 4 games against Ohio State. Never hurt them the way Kyle McCord hurt Ohio State today. And so that's not nothing. This has been a defense-first team. We're not playing like how dare the defense not play, but that's worth noting. We're also, and we already talked about, we're carrying that, right? You carry that a little bit when you look forward to Michigan that, some of the things that Ohio State doesn't do as well defensively showed up. Like they didn't really have a chance really to get after the passer today because they just weren't going to have Wimsatt sit back there and do that. And so the result is a quarterback who can move and a pretty good running back. And Rutgers at time moved the ball. And guess what? Like Michigan's got that. Both those things.
Yeah. Kyle McCord ran for 27 yards against Michigan. He ran for 16 yards against Wisconsin, and he ran for 159 yards today.
That's something, right?
Yep. I think that's
not fluke.
Nope.
All right. What else, Mike?
Yeah, guys, next question comes from Matt. He's saying, here's my question. Can this Ohio State team win in more ways than any other team in the country? They remind me of a baseball pitcher without a dominant pitch, but 3 to 4 really good pitches that can get him through a game.
They're
junk balling it? Crafty lefty?
Yeah, that's pretty smart, actually. I think I agree with that. But maybe at a certain point, not having the 97-mile-an-hour heater with movement comes back to bite you. But I do think there's something to be said for finding different ways to win games.
Because like you can junk, right? You're junk balling your way through like a game in the middle of August, and then you get into the playoff and the bases are loaded in the 8th inning and you're like, I got 5 good pitches. And Jose Altuve is coming to the plate and you're like, oh
yeah, they just like
I had 101 mile per hour heater right now.
Yeah, they're not used to seeing your stuff and they're swinging at your slider out of the zone, but then they realize that you never throw your slider for strikes because if you did, you get hammered, and then you start spitting on it and make you throw a fastball, and then it's curtains.
And we have talked about this before. This is a crazy team. This is an incredibly odd team. They are a defense first team that is not that consistent offensively. that also has 4 game-breaking talents on offense.
Yeah.
That at any moment, because what you're talking about, who's your slider out of the zone? Cade Stover.
Mhm.
Like, who's your splitter? Emeka Ibuka. Who's your curveball? TreVeyon Henderson. And frankly, I don't know if Marvin's not a heater. Is there a heater?
Yeah, Marvin's,
I don't know.
Marvin's probably a heater. Yeah.
They can't throw 100. Marv's like, what are you?
Yeah, Marv's probably a heater. That's probably right.
Marv's a heater. So, like, that idea that there's a foundation, because you can't only live by, well, we think this might pop. We think this might pop. You have to have a foundation. So they do. The defense is the foundation. And it's where, like, my 2002 comparison, which, again, I don't know. There's a lot. You take this win in 2002, except there's 2002.
Yeah, how many times did they score?
Guys?
How many times did they score 35 points in 2002?
Right, and obviously Michael Jenkins and Maurice Clarett were awesome in 2002. Yeah. But I mean, like, this is more. This is, and so it is the most explosive, offensively deficient team you ever would want to see in your life. It's like, I can't believe what's wrong with this. Go find a team who doesn't feel great about its offense and then show them the TreVeyon Henderson play from today, where he turned an 8-yard pass in the middle of the field into a 65-yard play and be like, oh, isn't this terrible? Be like, oh, I wish we could do that once a decade. So they are getting, but the thing I think that pops up is, if they play a ruthlessly efficient offensive team, what's going to happen? Which Michigan might be. And if they're relying on that explosiveness, you've got to make sure you give yourself an opportunity to explode.
Yeah.
Like the idea that you would get to the Michigan game and be like, oh, well, Marv had 5 targets for 2 catches. Like that, I think, that's, if you let Marv be Marv against Michigan, you like Ohio State's chances. But you see a game like this, and then you think, okay, well, what if that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I don't. Part of me feels like we're maybe sounding too many alarms about the defense. Like, they gave up 16 points in a game when the other team started 2 drives in their own territory, in Ohio State territory.
They did.
So, like,
Rutgers was not marching 75 yards down the field repeatedly
all the time, right? And there were like a couple of drives were extended by like dumb penalties. One of them I thought was a terrible call, and Tyleik Williams like kind of like barely shoving a guy after a play, which I don't think should rise to the level of an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, but it did. So I'm still like inclined to believe that if you're going to tell me Ohio State has a healthy secondary, I think they're going to be pretty locked in against a team that's going to be able to throw the ball. Maybe they didn't come into this game as sharp as they needed to be because Rutgers was really no threat to throw and kind of found some stuff mostly via busted tackles, I think, to move the ball a little bit. So got to shore up some stuff on the run game and get better linebacker play. But I still believe all the pieces are there for this defense to be a championship level defense.
That being said, Rutgers started with 3 3-and-outs in the first quarter. Let me read you these Rutgers drives. 10 plays, 76 yards field goal. 8 plays, 29 yards field goal. 9 plays, 44 yards field goal. 7 plays, 55 yards interception. 6 plays, 15 yards punt. 6 plays, 75 yards touchdown. 9 plays, 62 yards stopped on downs. That's moving the ball a little bit. Like that.
Yeah, but the 9 plays, 62 yards stopped on downs, I think, had 2 15-yard penalties against Ohio State's defense on it.
Well, don't make but they were pass interference penalties that they forced. Right? Was that they definitely had a drive where they had 2 pass interference penalties because they had the one on Sonny.
The one on Sonny though was not like the one on Sonny was just a bad play by Sonny. Like there was a terrible throw. Like Sonny gave him a break. It wasn't like it was a threatening pass and you had to do pass interference there to make sure he didn't catch it.
No, I know, but like if they wind up in a situation where Sonny Styles is locked in coverage against Michigan, that could happen.
Yeah, right. That's fair. Yeah.
All right, Mike, what else?
Yeah, guys, this one comes from Luke. He says, it's beginning to feel like every year Ohio State is really banged up down the stretch. How much blame do you place on the strength and conditioning regimen for that? Is every other team experiencing the same kind of injury issues as Ohio State? It does seem like a lot of players are getting banged up down the stretch here for Ohio State.
It certainly was a thing that came up once Jackson Smith and Jigba got hurt last year, Landis, and it sort of created, I think, a question mark in a lot of fans' minds.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I can't answer is how it compares to other teams. Like, I'm not scouring the injury report for all the 130 or 31 other teams there are in FBS football to see how Ohio State compares. I guess I can just agree that it does feel like they seem to mount up on Ohio State. I think part of that is they don't play a lot of guys. So I don't know. I think maybe one thing you could look at is snap counts for Ohio State's players compared to some of the other best teams in the country. Because I would imagine that Ohio State's players probably play more. But yeah, like I think it's fair to question like Mickey Marotti when stuff like this happens. It seems like it's a lot of soft tissue stuff and sprains and things that.
Well, I mean, but like Kyle McCord's an ankle, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s an ankle, Emeka
Yeah,
Buka's
but that's
an
all
ankle.
like, but that's all ligament stuff, isn't it? Like it's.
I don't know. Marvin got rolled up, right?
Yeah, Marvin got rolled up. Devin Brown got rolled up too.
Like to me, it's
Emeka
when you
got
talk about
rolled up.
hamstrings and stuff, that's when I raise an eyebrow a little bit more than
Yeah.
some of this other stuff.
Yeah, and like TreVeyon was like a broken bone, I think, last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not all the same thing, but I don't know. It just feels like a lot. Like and the nature of the availability report, I think, exacerbates some of the frustrations with that. It's like Denzel Burke's not playing this week, and Kate
Right.
Stover is not on the report, but it doesn't play at all. So like, doesn't make you feel any better about it.
Yeah. It's a fine line. It's hard to figure out because nobody wants young injured athletes to be forced to play in situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it really, that Jackson had a hamstring early, tried to come back, re-aggravated it, and like that was it. It was sort of like, how did this feels mismanaged in some way, or that this was not more so to me than where they are right now. With I think they've had a little bit of bad luck with some of their best players getting rolled up. Mike, anything else?
Yeah, guys. Next one, I'm going to lump a bunch of questions that we've had come in. I'm assuming you guys will know what it is about Parker Fleming, but I think this one comes in from Cross, which I think wins the texter question of the day. He says, the Brian Ferentz Survivor Show needs to be changed to the Parker Fleming Survivor Show.
Great
I'll
idea.
give you the floor, Doug.
So I will say, I do think it's important to differentiate. The Brian Ferentz Survivor Show is really about nepotism more than poor coaching, because there's poor coaching all over the place. Just like there's poor podcasting and poor writing and poor play. Like there's a lot of people who don't execute their jobs at a high level on a regular basis. So that's normal. Like employing that person because he is a blood relative is the thing that led to the Brian Ferentz Survivor Show. Now, the next thing from nepotism is hiring your friends, is hiring the easy guy, is hiring the guy down the hall, is hiring the yes man, is hiring a guy because you've known him for a while. And I think Parker Fleming fits that category. Was Parker Fleming the best special teams coach in America available to Ohio State? No. Was he down the hall? Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing on his resume that tells you he should be a coach at Ohio State other than the fact that he was already in the building.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they have 3 hires like that on staff: Corey Dennis, Keenan Bailey, and Parker Fleming. It certainly feels like the way they've talked about Keenan Bailey, that he was grinding, doing extra stuff, providing extra value in the building, that I don't think anybody is totally against hiring from within, right? But I think those 3 combined, and then you throw in the fact that Corey Dennis is Urban Meyer's son-in-law, and it calls it into question.
Mm-hmm.
So now when you have an area that is deficient when it's coached by the guy down the hall, it does not rise to the level of Brian Ferentz Survivor Show. We will not be doing a Parker Fleming Survivor Show. But if he's a special teams coach next year, I'm not asking a question about anything else the entire year. I'm not going to do that right now because they're in the midst of a playoff chase. And we've asked and whatever, but it's intolerable. And Parker Fleming didn't hire himself. So like Ryan Day, this is like, there's a lot of tests for a head coach, Landis. This is one of them, right? You got to fire a guy when he's not performing. And by any metric, Parker Fleming, who was underqualified for the job when he was hired, is not his units are not performing. And I don't know how to judge a special teams coach by anything other than your units are messing up.
Yeah, and also just generally how you feel about them going into the game. And going into this game, we felt terrified about their special teams doing something that would not cost them the game, but perhaps make it closer than it needed to be. And that happened.
Even when Ryan Day got here, right? Was Matt Barnes on the staff in 19? Was he an initial hire?
He was part of Ryan Day's first wave of hires, yeah.
Yeah. And why did he hire him? Because he was the special teams coach at Maryland, and they thought Maryland did some good special teams touch against Ohio State.
Mhm.
So they hired him to like lead special teams and also coach safeties, right?
Mhm.
It's like, who did they hire? A current Big Ten special teams coach who they thought his special teams units had performed well.
Yeah. Who
Why did
also
they hire
provided
Parker Fleming? Because his office was near the Coke machine.
Yeah. Matt Barnes also provided additional value as someone who could coach and recruit defensive players.
So yeah.
Allegedly.
It's one of those things. It's like every coach hires at least some people that they do it because they're comfortable with them, and like creating an atmosphere of comfort is not an unworthwhile pursuit as a head coach. You also have to make sure you're simultaneously challenging yourself and bringing in people who think differently, because all of a sudden comfort can turn into staleness very, very quickly.
Mhm.
But this is a specific issue, and he can't be back. And I think it's worth a conversation. Because my whole thing with Brian Ferentz last year was, why don't you fire him right now? And Kirk Ferentz was like, well, we don't really do that during a season. I'll ask on Tuesday, Ryan, why are you considering, did you consider making a move with your special teams coach? I don't know what I beat around the bush. Ryan, have you given consideration to firing Parker Fleming during this season? Why not?
Yeah.
Fair?
I think so.
Does it rise to the level of one of the 25 questions that should be asked of Ryan Day on Tuesday?
Yes, I think it does.
All right, then I need to ask it before somebody asks, Ryan, special teams are, I always hate that when like somebody asks the topic in the worst way possible.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely somebody who would ask a question like, I'm not saying you should fire him, when actually that is the question.
Yes.
Because they're afraid to ask it. But just what can you do? I mean, obviously fans, blame the fans. All right, I'll try to raise my hand early on Tuesday. Mike, anything else?
A lot of Texans would be very happy with you, Doug, because a lot of Texans have sent in that someone needs to ask that question. Seth would like to know. He says, I simply don't understand the offense. Pass blocking was great to start the year, and the offensive line couldn't run block. Now, passing situations are making our already shaky quarterback see ghosts because he has 2 free rushers every pass attempt. What is going on with the offense?
Now I kind of want to ask that question on Tuesday. I'll just read the text and claim it for my own.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, Landis, isn't it?
Yeah, that doesn't count as your question. Yeah, you're just asking that on behalf of somebody. You have your own question, but
hey, Ryan, this one, somebody paid $6 to us to ask this question. Do you
Seth,
have any?
Seth in Denver. That's what
Seth
he wants.
in Denver.
Seth,
he can't. He lives in mountains. He can't get here. Landis, do you have an answer for Seth in Denver?
No. I see the same thing. I want to go back and look over the last couple of games and look at blitz rates, because I like to have teams stumble upon Kyle McCord is terrible on the pressure, and this offensive line can't block more than 4 people. So let's send 6 and 7 every time. Maybe that's happened. But there have been more like individual breakdowns too. Like I actually thought Josh Fryer had a pretty good first half of the year, and has not had a very good second half of the year. Maybe the same for Carson Hinsman too. I also feel like Josh Simmons has been a little better too. So like the stuff that was like a little questionable early is a little better now, and the stuff that was like fairly solid early is more questionable now. So there's like they can't get everything kind of hitting on the same page at once.
The play where the blitzer ran right through the hole as Josh Fryer was standing there, it looked like a glitch, like a video game glitch, that he was like stuck. And I understand that it's the call, and like he in that moment was believing like that's not his responsibility. That's very frustrating for fans to watch.
I think so. That is, Ryan and I talked a little bit about that last week. And I tried to ask and probably was too descriptive in my question to get a good answer, because I like basically gave Ryan play by play and said, like, is that what happened? And he was like, I stopped listening to you 10 seconds ago. So, but Ryan Day talked last week about like offensive tackles being able to identify who is the more threatening player. And on that play, there were two guys on that side. Josh Fryer knows that G. Scott is going to chip and then release. So Josh has his eyes on that end man on the line of scrimmage, who actually like ends up running with G. And then Josh Fryer has his eyes trained out wide, doesn't see the linebacker coming from depth right through the hole for the sack. Right, that was a sack play. But I think that Josh Fryer has had some issues the last 2 weeks making that decision. Who is the most dangerous player? Who do I need to block? Who do I need to let go? And has gotten mixed up a couple of times because of that.
And sometimes are there tackles who can make the wrong decision and they're so athletic they can figure it out on the fly anyway?
Yeah. But on that play, Josh Fryer
Don't play for Ohio State this year.
Jumped out to his right and then just kind of stayed there. And then by the time he realized what was happening, it was too late.
Yeah. I mean, again, like it's not Chase Young's on the other side lining up over Ohio State tackles and just destroying them one-on-one. It's not. It really is not, right? In the pass protection. That's not what it is.
No.
It's identifying what they should do in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Mike, anything else?
Yeah, guys. Clayton would like to know. He says, should Ohio State fans be worried that it is November and Jim Knowles' defense is looking leaky again? Was this a trend for him also at Oklahoma State?
So Ohio State fans believing it was a trend last year, right? Because 10 games in last year, people felt pretty good about the Ohio State defense. Do you think it's leaking, Landis?
I don't know that I agree that it's leaky. I guess I would say that this is the most leaky that it has looked. I don't know that I consider that a trend from previous games. I'm looking at Oklahoma State in his last year there. In November at Oklahoma State, 2.3 yards per play against West Virginia, 6.3 against TCU, 1.8 against Texas Tech, 5.3 against Oklahoma, 3.9 against Baylor in the Big Ten championship. So I don't know that I see a trend there. I don't. I think if over the course of this season, teams have found ways to hit explosive plays on Ohio State's defense occasionally, then I would have maybe my antennas up a little bit and be more worried than I am. But it hasn't happened. And like I'll repeat myself from what I said earlier in the year, like Jim Knowles said, like last year we were giving up explosive plays at Toledo and Indiana.
Yeah.
And the fact that they did it against the best teams they played at the most egregious clip ultimately probably shouldn't have been all that surprising. They haven't done this all year. So I don't know if that's what we're staring down here. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'll own that. We can talk about it when the time comes, but I don't know that I'm worried about that right now.
And actually today was actually pretty much in line with what they've been this year, which is like maybe let some people get some first downs, but then stand up when they need to. Mm-hmm. And those goal line stands in the red zone and holding them to field goals instead of touchdowns. And they only scored one touchdown. And they did have a couple short fields there. Actually is pretty in line. And they weren't giving up big plays. Again, they gave up a big play on a trick play. But I don't know that this is outside the realm of what they've been doing all year, except maybe a little more success by the opponent running the ball consistently. But they still only gave up one touchdown.
Yeah, they gave up the 35 on the slant that had the missed tackle.
Yep.
And I think anything over 10 yards is probably correct to consider that an explosive rushing play. But I think when you really get in the troubles when teams start ripping off like 20-yard runs on you consistently, they had the 45 yards on the trick play and then didn't have another run over 17 yards. So there are 6 other runs of 10 yards or more, which is worth noting. But I don't think they were like consistently chunking them.
All right, Mike, let's do one more if you have it.
Yeah. I was gonna say this is a good one here from Rob. And there's a lot of texters that kind of sent in more so comments than questions, but about this and kind of summarize it. They're really saying that they're not having fun watching this team. And Rob would like to know. He says, I'm trying my best to live in the moment, but it's just not fun watching this team. He says, I wasn't a fan back in 2002, but is this what it was like back then?
So we are not the people who can comment on that. I would say one of the things is no, because you can't recapture the underdog feeling of 2002, right? Because Tress comes in, the end of the Cooper era is about failing in the biggest moments. Tress beats Michigan in 01, but all of a sudden you're doing this in 02 and nobody expects it. And I don't think anybody was complaining along the way of like, I can't believe they only won by 5. Like that's not what that season was about. And then when Urban Meyer sort of establishes this and the Ryan Day establishes another thing with Ohio State, you can't recapture that part of it. Now, they're number 1. Georgia's tied at the half. Florida State's going to be tied at the half. Texas should have lost today. Like, they're number 1. Go for a walk. I thought this game sucked. I thought the broadcast sucked. I thought the game sucked. It was the Rutgeriest Rutgers that ever Rutgered. And, like, that's to Rutgers' credit. They Rutgered it up, which means it's not fun. So there's no explosive pass plays. Like, there weren't that many big defensive plays other than the pick 6. Like, it was not, I was watching the game thinking, like, this is not fun.
Mm-hmm.
So go for a walk. What's fun for Ohio State fans is being undefeated. Very fun. Being number 1, very fun. Having Marvin Harrison Jr., very fun. Having JT Tuimoloau. Having Denzel Burke when he's healthy. Having TreVeyon Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
So, but even while you have all these wonderful things, I would agree today that sucked.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes it's more of a grind, and this was that.
Yeah.
Even if it ends up with being a 35-16 win, this was not the most compelling television. So I don't know. I don't know that I would say that you should feel that way like all year. Like Notre Dame won by a touchdown, take it, baby.
Yeah,
that's a classic. Penn State won by 8, take it.
Tough. Boom.
I
hate saying boom. Yeah. No. You handle your business.
Yeah, you don't have to have Rutgers shoved down your throat and enjoy it. Like I'm on board with that.
No. And no Rutgers next year. Next year. So that's okay. I also thought we were talking about like CBS noon. That did not get you fired up for college football. First of all, there's no pregame show. What did you learn about Paella in the pregame show?
I didn't learn anything other than because I had the sound off. But I just I was watching. I had like game day on one TV and big noon on the other TV, and then I flipped over to CBS like I don't know 5 minutes before the Ohio State game was supposed to start, and there were like a guy and a girl in there like making taquitos, and they were getting judged by somebody. It's like, what is this?
Yeah,
there's no juice.
No juice. And I was gonna do the whole podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes beat the Rutgers Scarlet Knights on Saturday. Kyle McCord didn't have his greatest game, but somehow managed to find Marvin Harrison Jr. for 2 big touchdowns because that was the way the entire game was announced for 3.5 hours. Yeah. And everything was said in announcer voice where you start like this at the beginning of the sentence and then you do this at the end of the sentence. And it drove me crazy every moment of the game.
Yeah, well, you and I came in with preconceived notions of Tom McCarthy, who his full-time job is being the Phillies play-by-play man, and he stinks.
Bring me Gus. I know, like nobody's perfect, but we knew, and this is why we talked about it at the beginning of the year. This was an adjustment for Ohio State fans, for real, to not have as much ESPN, to have these new CBS and NBC announcer crews in your life. And like some of it's been okay. We were kind of talking about, I think people are coming around a little bit on Noah Eagle and Todd Blackledge on the NBC stuff. I thought the whole package today was a turd.
Well, you got the C team for CBS because they got the triple header. And Ohio State got the short straw. And
so it's just the nature. This is what it's now. Sometimes when Ohio State plays Rutgers, they score 56, and then it's like, well, at least you get to see that. Mm-hmm. Like it would have been fun to see like Carnell Tate go crazy today or something, right? We just weren't going to get that. All right, let's wrap that up. This was probably too long given what the game was. This postgame show was too long given how the game was played and announced. So we appreciate you guys joining us on the postgame show here on the podcast. We'll have stuff on Sunday. We'll have Monday morning podcast daily. Landis and I will actually be back then, because we'd like to give Berm time to travel when he's out and about, like he is in Piscataway this weekend. And then we'll be back on Tuesday talking with Ryan Day and Jim Knowles more about what is next, which is it Michigan State? Is that right?
That's right. Michigan State on Saturday night.
Saturday night. That'll have a little. Is that NBC? That'll be Todd
That is
Blackledge and Noah Eagle again,
NBC
right?
primetime.
Little juicier.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, a little juicier. So anyway, thanks to you guys for joining us here today. For Mike Yustowski, thanks for producing, brother, making us sound good and look good. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was the Postgame Show on the podcast.